Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're talking about Jean Grey's uniform because unfortunately I haven't gotten lucky enough to unlock her potential yet, but fortunately I've still had enough time to play around with her uniform to make a pretty good judge of how much better it makes Jean Grey. And so, we're going to talk about the uniform. We're going to go into some gameplay. We're going to also compare it to her base kit because I think although a lot of misinformation has started to dissipate or been misproven, I still think there is quite a bit out there. And there are still people who ask things like, is Jean Grey's uniform good? Does it make the character better or worse? And I think mainly this stems from the fact that it changes her skills from flame damage or fire damage to either energy or mind. So if we look at her original kit, we have a 4, 3, and 1 skill that deal fire damage. Now remember, just remember the fact that 1 and 3 really don't do very much damage at all with her base uniform, but 4 does do a lot of damage. And whether you have her base kit or her uniform, her ultimate skill will always do fire damage, so it's really unavoidable. But when you change over to her X-Men Red uniform, you now have a 3rd and 5th skill with mind damage instead of the 1, 3, and 4. So 1 and 3 are really not a big deal, but 3 basically stays as an elemental type attack, except instead of fire, it's mind. And now instead of 4, you have 5. 5 does a lot of damage, and it's a lot more consistent now with her new uniform, so I actually think this is a good change. It would be nice if 4 was also mind damage, but it's an interesting change, and I don't think it's one that makes the character worse at all, but it will force you, if you have a fire damage obelisk on Jean, to consider taking it away. Honestly, I don't think it's worthwhile, personally, to have a fire damage obelisk on a character for 1 skill, especially because I know a lot of you, like me, don't have Jean tier 3 yet. So I would start rolling mind damage obelisks, or the possibility, considering for a CTP of authority or regen or destruction or energy or rage, something that we'll figure out later on down in the pipeline. I'm not too sure which one to give her yet, so I don't want to say with absolute certainty, although she's been doing quite well with a CTP of destruction. As far as the rest of her skills go, they gave her a lot of the same stats. They kind of copied and pasted a lot of the OP stats that made her very strong. She lost the super armor on her 3rd skill, so that is technically a nerf. She also lost the priority iframe on Bonds of Destiny, and she also got an additional 1 second of time freeze on Mind Distortion. So instead of doing 2 seconds, it now does 3 seconds. But pretty much all of the other buffs are the same. She has an additional all defense down on 5 that she didn't have before. I'm not exactly sure if that applies to world bosses. I wasn't paying too close attention, but 18% is quite low, and 3 seconds is also quite low, so it's not too big. I think the biggest change that people are going to see from this uniform is the tankiness. She was tanky before because of the heal, because of the refreshing, because of the guard hit on her 3rd skill, and the iframes. But now she's even worse, or I guess better, with this uniform because they changed her passive around to decrease incoming damage by 30%, 50% increased resistances, which makes it like really hard to kill her when you're using Psylocke or Thor or characters like that. And then the additional 50-50 skill and bonus damage. So if we compare that to her old uniform, she was just getting the 70% chance to become immune and the 50-50. So they gave her a flat 30% damage reduction and the resistances. Put all that together with a character that revives at max HP and you're in trouble. On top of that, she has a 15% all attack buff from her uniform. So this is a pretty crazy, I think just based on the stats, before you actually start playing the character, I think it's quite obvious that this uniform is much better for her. None of the other effects, because they copied and pasted a lot of the buffs, like the 10% all speed buff on Phoenix Awaken, none of the other changes to her kit necessitate changing her build in a large way. You may have to change around some of the Urus just because you have more options now with the uniform. You don't need to give her skill cooldown or ignore defense Urus, but you don't have to change her ISO weight set. She doesn't get, she needs that attack speed either way, so it really doesn't make too much of a difference for the rest of the build. But we're going to dive into some gameplay now. I want to show you guys, because a lot of people have been complaining about the fire damage, I want to go into an Ebony Maw stage. And we're going to go into a stage that's a little bit easier, just so you guys can get a good idea. We're almost close enough for a stage 50 without the penalty, but that's okay. And we're going to take Jean in. We're going to take her in with her uniform first. We're not going to give her the absolute best team up, but we're going to give her something that's competitive. Obviously, we're not going to use Ghost Panther because it's unfair to her new uniform. So we're just going to go ahead and give her Coulson and Cyclops. We're actually going to switch this. Scratch that. We're going to give her Coulson and Nick Fury. And we're not going to give her any strikers. I just want you guys to see the damage. The elemental damage is still very much there. Now, she may have slightly less damage with this uniform, at least at level 60, because one less skill is elemental, particularly for Ebony, but I find that this uniform is a lot easier at proccing her damage proc, and it's a lot more consistent, and that's what I do. I do 4 cancel 5, and that seems to do quite well for me to trigger the proc pretty consistently, I would say. And, you know, for a level 50 character to be able to do this is not an easy task. There are few that can, and Jean Grey has always been, while she's been, you know, good at PvE, she's always been much better at PvP. So I think people who are shocked that she's not, you know, completely obliterating PvE content, they should be happy, because we accidentally triggered on 4 there, because you know, she, trust me, you're never gonna, you're gonna get sick of seeing Jean Grey in every PvP team from now on. Especially if they change around the ban lists and she's not banned more often, but she doesn't need to, and she never recently, she wasn't #1 for PvE anyways, so it's not a big shock that she's not back on top for that. But I honestly much prefer this. So we got a minute in, and we're about 13 and change bars. She has more hits now, and there's less of a dice roll at the very beginning with the proc. If you guys remember with her old skill set, you have to use 5 cancel 4 in order to get that proc to land because of those hits. So it took us about a minute and 20 seconds to get him down to his next phase. It's not bad. I want to now check out the exact same team without her uniform. So she is going to lose a considerable amount of energy attack. I can't really account for that because it's a rare uniform, and I mean, rare is not even that built, but it's a 430% or 430 flat stat energy attack on top of the 15% all attack. So there's really no way for me to simulate that 15% easily. So we dropped from 31 to 25,000 energy attack. You know, I could give her a slightly better team, but the point is basically the same. Her damage is going to be as good, if not better. And then overall, especially when you get her up to level 70, when she gets more stats, that 15% is going to be worth more as well because it's stacking on top of that. So you have a situation where I think a character is better overall and easier to play, and that's really the dice roll that you're making with Jean Grey's. You're casting the 4 cancel 5, and you're hoping that it hits. Why am I taking so much damage? It's so weird. And if it does hit, you get some nice damage for sure. Wow, I died. I'm shocked. If the 5th skill gets canceled, you don't get any of those tornadoes, and then you don't really get very good damage. So in this case, we're also reminded of the problem with Jean Grey's old rotation, which is that her 5th skill is quite easily canceled. Now, yes, the damage is good. We're also using the 3rd skill for the self buff. That's why I did 3 cancel 5 at the beginning there. But if you don't get those you know, proc hits when the tornadoes start flying, you do set yourself up for a situation in which you know, the proc won't be as good, and the damage will suffer because of that. Because the 4th skill is really where all her damage comes from. You want the self buff from 5, but see there I triggered too early, and in that case, unless I had a CTP of energy, but that would only offer the chain hit, that wouldn't actually offer, and there we triggered accidentally on 3. Jean Grey was always quite difficult to time a proc with. We should have gotten it already. We should have kind of pushed him into his next zone or into his next phase. So we did that one a little bit faster. So, you know, it seems as though this non-uniform with about 6,000 less or 5,000 and change less energy attack is doing more damage to Ebony, but it requires a lot of patience with the skill rotation, and in general, you're still not going to have the same amount of success in PvP. Now I want to show you guys the PvP aspect, which I think is the much more important part, and it's the part where you're going to want to purchase this uniform no matter what. So we're going to fight another tier 2 Jean Grey. This time we're going to use Jean Grey. Well, we're gonna change this team around, but this time we're going to use Jean Grey here, and we're going to see how she fares against her non-uniformed versus uniformed self. And we've got a pretty Jean Grey specific team here. We've got Wasp for the debuff and also for the 10% HP. Actually, Wasp, don't kill her. And then we've got Victorious for an additional 30% HP. So we're going to turn back autoplay on, and we're going to see how the old Jean Grey, how she does. Gets the first kill, pretty good. And then gets swamped. And that fifth skill canceling is really not to be underrated. It was always very frustrating playing as Jean and getting your fifth skill canceled and not getting that extra damage. You get the buffs even if the fifth skill gets interrupted, but you don't get the damage. And so even in world boss, if the fifth skill gets canceled, if it gets interrupted because of targeting, then you're in a situation where you've lost a lot of your damage. She still has very good damage, definitely, but not buying a uniform because the character seems to be a little bit worse against Ebony specifically, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Trust me, if you play any kind of PvP, you're going to want to pick up this uniform, and this is pretty much going to be the reason why. You guys are going to see. So she died against Jean the first time around. We're going to turn off autoplay. We're going to let Wasp die here, and I might make a video on this later. I'm not 100% sure what's going on, but the AI is pretty much genius for Jean Grey. It's pretty much as good as it gets, because the AI is smart enough to only rotate through 2 skills. So you can see here it's actually happening where they're doing the exact same skill at the exact same time. It's 5 and then 3 and then 5 and then 3, like clockwork. Now I did get interrupted there, so he managed to get a kill off, but we'll see if he'll be able to get another one once I start guard breaking. And the fifth skill, on her new fifth skill, it guard breaks even if you have guard break immunity. So this is one of the problems with it. Captain Marvel is still going to be a good counter to Jean Grey because she has iframe ignore, so get your tier 3 Captain Marvels ready. But because of that iframe, or because of that guard break immunity ignore or guard break immunity pierce, you have situations where a Jean Grey can take down an entire team simply because she continues to spam 5 and 3, and the characters that she's fighting against get locked in against her. And so this is similar, if you guys remember, to Quicksilver's old rotation. Before we had characters that could out heal him. We had situations where he would just keep doing skills and he would keep guard breaking you. You also have Nova kind of locking you in with the second skill over and over and over again. And then you have a situation, wow, I died there, that's weird. And then you have the situation of, I can't remember the character now, but you had characters who could just basically auto-lock you. I think it was Sharon Rogers' old fifth skill with the Dark Star armor, where it creates that dark ball. Those types of skills that seem to guard break you even when you have guard break immunity, they're back, and Jean Grey's got them on her, and she always had them on her fifth skill, but again, her old fifth skill with the tornadoes, a lot easier to get canceled, and doesn't last as long. The tornadoes definitely don't last as long as this new sort of pink orb. And so you'll see here, I got unlucky the first time, but I think we are going to get the kill here. So this is a tier 2 level 60 Jean Grey killing a tier 3 level 70 Jean Grey. And so with that being said, you have to wonder what kind of nightmares await us when we start seeing more tier 3 Jean Greys. And she's basically just cycling right now through 2 skills, 5 and 3, and that's it. And this is shocking because she's able to, well, she's going to die there, but otherwise she's able to completely shut down characters, and they get trapped, and she does enough damage with this new uniform. There's no way that the other Jean Grey, that the regular default Jean Grey, could kill a tier 3 Thanos. And again, binary Captain Marvel seems to be our only hope on autoplay, at least. So that is kind of the reaction and the kind of state of the union for Jean Grey's new uniform. It does appear to do a little bit worse against Ebony. I'm talking like, 5 to 10 seconds worse. It's not like massively worse, and I do imagine that when you take her into Cull Obsidian, you'll see that the damage is the same, if not better, with this uniform, and same thing goes for someone like Thanos. But additionally, on top of all the buffs that she gets, it's unequivocally true, it's unequivocally the case that with all of these changes, in addition to the way the AI is playing her in PvP, you absolutely want to pick up this uniform if you have a 6-star Jean Grey. I want to make that clear. If you don't have Jean Grey yet, don't get the uniform. The uniform's not going to unlock the character. The uniform's not going to be very good for a 1-star or a 2-star Jean Grey. But if you have Jean Grey at 6 stars, even at level 60 like I do, you owe it to her to get this uniform. I know it's 1,500 crystals, but it's going to be well worth the headache that you'll be saving yourself in timeline battle to get extra crystals, and then she'll actually perform as well, if not better, in PvE game modes than she did before, and she has a much smoother rotation. So I think this is a must-buy for pretty much everyone who has Jean Grey at this point. I'm honestly a little terrified. I'm trying not to play up that too much, but yeah, I don't know who's going to counter her besides Captain Marvel, because it seems like even speed types, you saw her solo a tier 3 Deadpool, nobody's safe. So let me know what you guys think of Jean Grey. Let me know what you think of the changes and the mind damage skills now. At least it finally syncs up with the Phoenix Force buff that she was getting. Oh, they changed it to fire damage. Well, at least she gets this one, the mind damage increase. Yeah, so now this one doesn't make sense. Awesome. Okay, let me know what you guys think. Hit me up in the comments down below. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.